In front, Requiem was mulling things over. One thought kept forcing itself to the front of his mind, and he asked shortly, "Why did you let Ligase change you?" Freya had been expecting this from the moment she levitated the carpet, and she smiled. "So, you worked out what I went to collect." Then it dawned on her that Requiem hadn't just mentioned the change, but also who had done it. A cold wave of panic washed through her body, and she turned to Requiem and implored, "Please keep it to yourself. He's not like the others." "Don't worry. His secret is safe with me. I don't think he should join the ranks of those psychopaths either." "How did you know?" "When you hugged, I could see the energy transfer. At one point, you were entirely gold. It was quite beautiful." Realising he had just let slip that he could see energy, Requiem quickly followed up with, "Not that you're not always a vision of radiance and beauty." Looking at Freya, he persisted. "You didn't answer the question. Why did you let Ligase rewrite your genes like that?" "He didn't give me anything I didn't already have. He just unlocked my potential," replied Freya, in her typically analytical Eastergate manner. "You could have been an ordinary person, and we'd still want you with us. You'd still be able to help," Requiem insisted. Freya smiled, warmed by the sentiment. It was rare for Requiem to say such things. "That's sweet, but I think we know that this is going to take everything we've got, and I mean to be ready for it." "But why? Why do something so risky?" he pressed as he looked at Freya. Choosing not to look back at Requiem, Freya replied, "Because this is important to you." "But—" Requiem stopped his questioning mid-flow as something caught his eye. Shooting out his hand, Requiem held Freya's arm. Seeing Requiem's sudden change in posture, Urisil and Geo ran to join them. "What is it?" asked Geo quietly. "The trees aren't closing up ahead as well, are they?" "As well?" Freya's head snapped around to see the path close behind them. "Yes, the path is sealing behind us," whispered Urisil. "That hasn't stopped us from being followed," said Requiem thoughtfully. "By who?" asked Keo in a hushed voice. "Not Loverboy, Mystery Man again?" Freya was quick to slap Geo, who gave out an unmanly yet quiet yelp and rubbed his arm. Urisil was keen to break up the squabbling. "Quiet, you two! I hope he has followed us. He may be able to help us out." Requiem walked to the edge of the path and stared into the forest. It was incredibly dark. Only a few trees could be seen before the darkness took hold. In some areas, shadows could be seen moving about, and the usual calls of animals heard. But from where Requiem was standing, it was unusually dark and silent. Geo walked up to Requiem and began to rub his arms. "You can feel the cold roll out from the woods here. It's like a wall of ice." Darkstalkers," said Requiem thoughtfully. On hearing the word, everyone froze. There's assassin things?" asked Urisil shakily. "Yes, they're out there, somewhere, but I can't see them." Freya spoke with a calm reserve. "What should we do?" "Prepare yourselves." "Right, I'm getting some artillery," declared Geo as he strode into the forest opposite. "Wait!" called Freya, stretching out an arm towards Geo. "The mystery man told us not to stray from the path." Geo stopped and looked at Freya. "He could have meant that metaphorically. I can't make much out of grass. I'm going to need something more substantial." A long branch from a tree shot out, wrapping its finger-like twigs around Geo's ankle and pulling him to the ground. "Geo!" shouted Freya as she dived to grab him. Vines quickly emerged from all directions, entangling Freya and preventing her from reaching Geo. Urisil didn't know where to start. Geo was slowly being pulled into the forest by a demonic-looking tree, whilst the life was being squeezed out of Freya by serpentine vines. He ran to help Freya, but he needn't have worried. Enraged, she flew high into the air until the vines snapped. "Right, you want to play rough, do you? I'll show you what a woman's fury is all about." Suspended high above the canopy, Freya could clearly see the pathway as she formed a large ball of lightning between her hands. "Catch!" she shouted, hurling the lightning at the tree, pulling Gio. Another ordinary-looking tree grew a hellish face and limbs and took the brunt of the lightning, splintering it. Uracil quietly admired Freya's move. Hell hath no fury indeed. Seeing that Freya could take care of herself, he went to help Gio. As he ran towards him, he picked up a large handful of grass and threw it at the limb of the tree which was now struggling to contain Gio. Turning into silver blades, the grass cut deep into the wood. "Thanks!" came a strained voice as Gio pulled himself up, tearing the weakened limb from the tree. Picking up the large branch, he converted it into a red hexagonal staff, as round as a person's head and as long as he was tall, with studded metal caps at each end. This was just like the staff he had used in Talis' courtyard, and was Gio's weapon of choice. "How's this for recycling?" Gio asked as he smashed roots and splintered branches. Trees all around them were now coming to life and advancing on the group. Requiem, however, was unconcerned. Each time a tree came close to him, he put his hand up as if to say, "Stop," and the tree exploded in a shower of splinters. This allowed him to stare intently into the forest to search for their true assailants. It was obvious to him that the Darkstalkers were manipulating the trees from a distance in the shadows. Freya's lightning balls came raining down one after another. Several feet from the path, she could see vast swathes of the canopy move, but, before she could fire, a giant snake sprang from the forest and began to constrict her. The snake was so large that much of its body was still wrapped around a giant tree as it coiled around Freya in mid-air. She had just enough breath to let out a single scream. That was all it took to get Uracil's attention. He looked up to see the brown snake towering above them, with Freya caught in its coils. Running over to Gio, he shouted, "I need a lift!" Without thinking, Uracil jumped onto the end of Gio's staff. With a mighty yell, Gio launched Uracil high into the air to land on the snake midway between Freya and the canopy. "I'm generally an animal lover, so I apologise in advance," he said to the snake, before placing his hands onto the snake's scales and disintegrating it until there was nothing left except for its clean, white skeleton. "Right, I didn't think this one through as well as I—" Uracil did not get a chance to finish cursing himself before the skeleton fell to pieces. He landed in a heap on the ground, with a large section of ribcage pinning him to the floor. Gio dashed over to Uracil and prized him free, flinging the bones at an advancing tree and skewering it. "Where's Freya?" Uracil asked in a panic as his eyes darted around, desperately searching for her. "I didn't batter into the forest, if that's what you mean. But I didn't see her come down, now you mention it," said Gio, as he fended off some vines. Uracil looked up to where Freya had been and calculated her trajectory. "Oh no," he said. "You didn't need to hit her into the forest. I think she fell there anyway." Suddenly Requiem was in the fight. "What?" he said, turning his head towards Uracil. "Freya!" he cried. Requiem whipped his head back to look at the dark forest, holding his hand straight up to the sky. He thrust it towards the darkness. Sunlight flooded from above, hit the grass floor, and flowed into every nook and cranny of the dense forest. Everything was brilliantly lit, and there, in all their menacing presence, were the Darkstalkers. The black demons of nightmares, so cruel, stood there, unflinching, staring with their large orb-like eyes at Requiem and the others. Gio and Uracil shuddered with cold, but it wasn't due to energy being sapped. They could feel the Darkstalkers' collective gaze penetrate their very being. One Darkstalker rubbed its massive jaws from side to side, scraping its long, thin, misshapen teeth together. It was baying for blood in a controlled, rabid state. It clearly wanted to tear Gio apart and add his scream to his collection. But it could also see that this was not part of the plan, at least not yet. A second Darkstalker crunched and cracked as he turned his gaunt body of black bones and flesh to look at Freya. She was slung low under the long, thin arm of another Darkstalker, The tense fibres of its muscles could be clearly seen as if there was no skin. The Darkstalker twisted its long skeletal body back to look at Requiem. As it did so, a mouth, a slit across its long wolf-like face, appeared to smile. Through its fangs, just below the noise of its cracking bones, an insidious laugh could be heard. The sound grew into a roar as the Darkstalker flung its arms wide and its head back. Its spine could be clearly seen holding its ribs aloft. The sight of no stomach, no anything, made Uracil turn the same shade of green as his cloak. A fourth Darkstalker then swiftly glided to a tree so large it must have been 1,000 years old. Thrusting its long, black, blade-like fingers into the bark, it effortlessly pulled the tree from its roots. Requiem, Geo and Uracil all tore their gaze from the laughing Darkstalker to see the tree hurtling towards them. Requiem put his hand up and splintered the tree, but the laughing Darkstalker turned the thousands of shards of wood into fiery fragments, which took on a life of their own as they swarmed like starlings, making entrancing waves in the sky as they tore artfully through the forest, setting it ablaze. "Don't worry, Requiem. I'll deal with these hot-headed pieces of plywood. You just get Freya." Uracil had composed himself and stepped to the front of the group to take on the raging fire. As he did so, the first Darkstalker unclipped the black chain hanging from its waist and cracked it like a whip at Uracil, bringing him to the ground with a thud. Immobilised by the chain, Uracil watched as a group of splinters ceased their artful flight and dove towards him. It appeared that the Darkstalker was not without a sense of humour. As Geo pounced on Uracil, it pulled him into the forest by the chain, leaving Geo to suffer a hard landing and a hot fate. Thankfully for Geo, his concentration was at its peak, and the splinters lost their spark as soon as they touched him. He got up from the forest floor, enraged, brushing the blackened splinters from his shirt. He charged into the forest, yelling wildly as he went, his massive footsteps making the earth quake and trees bow. The Darkstalker was dumbstruck. It had never met anyone who would not run in fear at the mere thought of it, let alone downright attack it. Uracil took his chance and pulled the unwary Darkstalker to its knees. "Right, now he's had it. Come on, Uracil, let's enlighten this shadow," shouted Geo, determined to make the Darkstalker pay. The Darkstalker controlling the splinters had clearly decided that playtime was over. The fire in its eyes became a fully fledged inferno. A ball of blood-red fire appeared in each of its large cupped hands, the flames licking its long fingers. Requiem readied himself. He too was going to show the Darkstalkers his mettle. The Darkstalker opened its hands to allow 2 pillars of fire to thrust into the sky. It stared at Requiem once more and began to laugh. Soon the sky turned red and bloody fire rained from above. Requiem gave a wry smile. Pulling the splinters over himself like a cloak, he turned them to a wave of ice. Not only did they cancel out the fiery rain, they continued forwards in an icy splintered sheet, skewering the Darkstalker in its hollow chest. Seeing now 2 of their kind in trouble for the first time in decades, the remaining Darkstalkers turned and ran for their shadow realm. Their long muscular legs not only gave them swiftness, but also allowed them to make short work of any obstacles. The skewered Darkstalker absorbed the splintered ice and fired it at the advancing juggernaut of Geo in the form of mud, sending him crashing to the ground. The 2 remaining Darkstalkers joined the others in their retreat, whilst Requiem ran to Geo, who was slowly being picked up by Uracil. "Don't worry about us," managed Uracil. "Get Freya." Uracil slipped on the mud and landed in a heap on top of Geo. "You useless runt. How can you be so heavy but not have an ounce of strength?" groaned Geo. Seeing that, for Geo and Uracil at least, things were back to normal, Requiem gave chase. Roots thrust from the ground and vines hung low in an attempt to stop him, but nothing was going to slow down his pursuit for Freya. He simply absorbed all he hit, saving the energy for just the right moment. Requiem knew there was no point in attacking the Darkstalkers. They'd only absorb the hits, just as he did. The Darkstalkers also realised that they couldn't slow Requiem. It was a race to the darkness. Some Darkstalkers sprang from tree to tree, passing Freya from one to the other, trying to confuse Requiem. But Requiem was focusing the light, causing a wave of gold to pass through the Amazon. He left one small patch of forest in darkness so that he knew exactly where the Darkstalkers were going. Throwing the monolith open in front of him, he dived through. Seeing their chance, the Darkstalkers sped to the only patch of darkness for miles. Just as they were about to slip into the shadows, the ominous hum of Requiem's monolith rang out and, in a flash of brilliant light, he emerged. The Darkstalkers ran headlong into Requiem. One ploughed halfway into the monolith before it slammed shut, cutting it in two. Requiem caught the laughing Darkstalker, now carrying Freya, by its skeletal neck and lifted it from the ground. "Give her back," demanded Requiem menacingly as he stared into its hollow eyes. Requiem swiftly began to drain all energy from the surroundings. He even took it from the Darkstalker he was holding. The ground froze. Trees cracked and vines burst. The Darkstalkers surrounding Requiem could not advance, or they too would be converted, cracking and flaking like the Darkstalker in Requiem's hand. The sinister laugh of the dying Darkstalker filled Requiem with cold dread. As he looked down at Freya, still under the monster's arm, he could see that she was almost blue. Her soft tanned skin was cracked and aging decades in seconds. Her thick, rich hair had thinned and turned grey. Most worrying of all, Freya had stopped breathing. Staring into the Darkstalker's empty, glistening eyes, Requiem conceded venomously, "Damn you!" Requiem shot energy back into the environment. Ice gave way to life, and Freya took in a deep breath. Requiem dropped the laughing Darkstalker to watch them dive into the darkness and leave him standing alone. All this power, but it did no good, Requiem said solemnly to himself as he looked down at his hands, his mind in turmoil. His despairing thoughts were broken by Gyo bounding in with Urisil on his back. "Sorry we're late," he panted. "Vines and roots came from everywhere, slowed us down." Still looking down, Requiem spoke like a broken man. "She's gone." "Gone? How?" shrilled Urisil, as he slipped off Gyo's back, paddling the air furiously to bring himself upright. "Stopping them meant killing her. There was nothing I could do," Requiem said despairingly. "What should we do?" asked Urisil frantically. Putting Urisil down on the ground, Gyo spoke with composure. "We'll do what she would have wanted and carry on." At this, Requiem finally looked up from his hands, and Urisil's pulse slowed. Neither could argue that this was what Freya would have wanted, and there appeared to be nothing they could do. Thus, in silent agreement, the three of them made their way back to the path, lamenting the loss of their dear friend.